Welcome back to Pack Mentality. And today, Caitlin and I are going to be talking about why you still can't do that skill and how to fix it. So, Caitlin, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get right into what we're going to be talking about today. So, one of the biggest things that people need to understand is that there's two big blocks in skill development, and we're going to talk about how to structure practice for faster progress, especially in gymnastic style movements like handstand push-ups, muscle-ups, and strict pull-ups. We're specifically going to be talking about gymnastic skills and how to actually develop them, because we see a lot of people spinning their wheels trying to mimic the movement too much like itself and forgetting that there's a whole foundation that needs to be built, and then there's like progression, skills, strength, and then also timing and coordination that go into these that require a lot of isolated work. Not that isolation in terms of like isolating a muscle group, but isolation in terms of isolating a specific skill. And I know you've dealt with this before specifically because we've done a lot of ring muscle up work to get you to where you are at today. I mean, how long have we been working on your muscle ups?
Well, a long time, because I've taken years off, right? Up and down. So I feel like I've been working on muscle ups, I don't know, for like 10 years.
Yeah, because of the kids.
Yeah, because I've had kids. So, but maybe a combination of like 5 years then.
Yeah, accumulated total of actual like working towards it. And you're still working on it to this day. Like we're still filming it, we still analyze it. And there's a lot of small details that go on that people don't really realize, especially when you can actually slow it down on a video.
Yes, exactly. That's why I film all the time. It doesn't look like you're making much progress, but when you put the films back to back from months of work, you can really see, the structure that goes on with that.
Yeah, 100%. So we're going to define two key terms here, and these are probably the two things that you're right now that you're lacking in. They're kind of general, but we're going to get specific with each one. So first off, just skill. So which is like a complex technical movement that requires strength, coordination, and motor learning. So it's like handstand push-ups, bar muscle-ups, toes to bar, handstand walking, all that stuff. And then there's also the non-fatigue setting, right? Because I think a lot of people practice this under fatigue too much.
Yeah.
Rather than treating it like, anything else for like a strength piece, where there's plenty of rest in between and there's time to sit down, recover. I think we don't give gymnastics movements the same respect as we do the barbell.
Yeah, exactly. And, you have to practice both, I think, under fatigue and with fatigue. And usually the person is dominant in one area, and they only practice it in one setting. So it's important to do multiple settings and multiple variations, because you have to accumulate a lot of reps, but you're going to get more sore as the week goes on of practicing it. So you're going to have different variations to practice, so that way you can accumulate the volume.
100%. And the reason why we like to start with a non-fatigue setting first is because it allows a practice environment where the nervous system is fresh and the movement quality is very high. And the movement quality is also the main focus of the piece, not intensity or the heart rate.
Yeah, and you want to practice, success. And so that's why we give it the least amount of, what is it called? Like other things going on. Like it's just the only focus, because you want to practice successful reps versus constantly failing under fatigue.
Exactly. It's like the same thing as a barbell movement when you bring it back around, is that if I keep practicing a snatch wrong over and over again and I keep missing forward, because this is what I used to do. I used to miss forward. And then
you got really good at missing forward.
I got great at missing forward. I was so good. I was like almost at the point where I could throw the barbell really well accurately, a whole nother sport. But what I realized, obviously, and took me too long to realize, is that I'm just reinforcing bad mechanics.
Yes.
So, of course, me with my big ego at the time, I kept either staying at the same weight because I just got frustrated with myself and I just wanted to keep on lifting.
Yes.
And I just kept going after it, just kept hammering at it, hoping that I'll get it eventually.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like I'm intelligent enough to, as soon as a lift even feels kind of off, like if it's a 50-50 lift, I'll drop weight, even if I make the lift successfully. But if I thought it was a 50% good mechanical lift, I'm lowering the weight.
Yeah, and that's what people need to do more of, is just finding that like level below of what they're trying to practice and get really good at that one to accumulate, again, volume, and then practice the really hard reps under no fatigue.
Yeah, no, 100%. Let's go over how to practice a skill properly. So Actually, no, wait, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Sorry, I look at the wrong notes. So 2 reasons why you're stuck first, actually, before we move on to how to practice the skill properly. So either you don't have the strength yet, so let's address that one, and then also you're only practicing the skill when you're tired. We kind of touched on that a little bit, but let's go into more detail. But let's first go over you don't have the strength yet, which is
Oh, it applies to everybody constantly. I mean, even people who have, good amount of strength, it's then, okay, well, now do you have enough strength to do multiple reps in a row? So you're always going to be chasing, to get stronger, because we all know that if you're stronger, it's going to be easier to do the movement. So yeah, strength, structure, bodybuilding is super important so that you have a good foundation and to prevent injury as well when you're attempting really complex movements.
yeah, no, 100%. Because if you can't do a strict press or you can't do
A strict pull-up.
yeah, exactly. If you can't do multiple strict pull-ups, you're not magically going to hit really good kipping reps.
Yes.
They're going to be really forced.
Yeah, and it's
And
going to be
very
really
dangerous on the
ugly.
joints.
Yeah, exactly. The whiplash of going back and forth. Your muscles can't handle, the load at that speed and intensity. So it's really important to build a good, strong foundation.
Right. And the way to fix this, everybody, is simply to be biased in strength work. So, and strength work, I don't know why everyone thinks it has to be barbell. Everyone automatically mentally thinks barbell when they think strength, but strength is defined as the productive application of force. So depending on the movement that you're working on, that you just need to work on the productive application of force directly tied to that movement.
Yeah, I think people will actually benefit more from doing single arm, single leg work and working with the dumbbells and kettlebells. Also easier on the joints too, because again, you're trying to accumulate a lot of volume in strength in 1 week, and you can only tolerate so much. So it's good to have different ways of attacking the same movement.
Yeah, 100%. And then let's go on to you're only practicing the skill when you're tired. So we already touched on this a little bit more, but at the end of Metcons, when you're already fatigued, there's probably a bad time to practice a technical movement. And then that's also the worst time to develop a new skill because your nervous system is already taxed. So the sequence of that movement's not going to fire the same when you're smoked.
Yeah, I think people will benefit more from actually practicing a complex skill before the workout and kind of like warming up with that, and spending a lot of individual time working on that, before, again, like Matt said, getting really taxed. Unfortunately, people have, tight on time, and so they're trying to fit it in when they can in a Metcon. So if that is, you and you're tight on time, well, then you have to sacrifice something, I think, in the workout itself. So either maybe scaling a portion of the workout so that you can do the more complex movement in less fatigue setting. You know what I mean? Like if you just have no time to practice this outside of class, then you're going to have to try to plan your class setting around practicing that.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. We're very well said. And if you guys are listening to this right now and you guys have been listening to the podcast for a while, thank you so much for giving us feedback and telling us that you guys listen, because it keeps Caitlin and I motivated to keep making these for you guys. So if you do me a favor, just share it with a friend and they might find some value in some of our episodes. Let's go into how to practice a skill properly. So the key principle here is that you need clean reps, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to be, like the snatch example I gave earlier, they have to be really good reps in order to move you forward. And with low fatigue, high focus, high repeatability, which is really key there, being able to do it multiple times. It's one thing to do it once, It's kind of like my handstand walk the other day where I just magically did 30 feet. And then once I was tired, I couldn't do anyone even do 5 feet after that. So reps is when the body is, fresh. And then also there's faster motor control learning in those settings when you are fresh.
Yeah, being able to break it down and scale yourself back so that you can practice more reps at a time is going to be super important. And if you don't know what level you're at currently, it's important to get a coach to kind of watch you and maybe do a quick session or assessment session with you to guide you in the right direction of, okay, you're basically here. You need to be able to do, 10 of these in order to move on to the next step. And so that way you have some type of baseline of how many should you be able to do. For example, strict pull-ups, how many should you be able to do in order to do a muscle up, right? And for me, I think 10 strict pull-ups to do a muscle up and maybe like 5 chest to bar pull-ups in order to do a muscle up. So those are some target points. And if you don't know that on your own, you should probably find a coach to help you out.
I like a lot what you said about establishing a baseline. And I think this is another good reason why working with a coach individually is really helpful because everyone can be different. Depending now we do have set standards. Like your muscle up example for 10 strict pull-ups. In order to do a muscle up is, I think, a pretty good standard. But there are other standards that are going to be different per the person individually. For some people, it's going to be like, well, you got to get 10 perfect push-ups first
Yeah.
before we do worry about anything else.
Right. Exactly. And so, and there is a progression for every single movement. And we aren't, I wouldn't say we are experts in gymnastics, but we are definitely self-taught. And with that said, we've tried it all. And so we kind of already know all the best tips and tricks and drills to do in order to get you from having, literally, Matt and I have zero background in gymnastics, but we are, self-taught, and we have come a long way. And I think, with that background, we're able to guide people in the right direction.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, we've been through all the growing pains. And believe me, when we see you guys practicing stuff, we've practiced that.
Yes.
And then we've also tried coaching that because we made a ton of mistake in our early days as coaches.
Yes.
And now we know, like, just from sheer volume of experience.
Yes.
And so many clients that we've worked with.
Yes.
That it's like we just know what to do. Like, we can just like look at someone, watch them do one thing and be like, I know what to do. Sorry. Oh wow, it's really ringing.
Yeah, you knocked the thing.
Sorry.
Again, just from working with a lot of people, and we know exactly maybe what drill will work for you based on like what we see, and we're just going to save you a lot of time. But I am constantly looking for new drills to apply to my clients, like, oh, maybe that will click for them, because everybody's different. Everybody needs a different kind of drill. But the bottom line is you have to practice them, and you have to practice them just like you would practice a lift, or if you would be training for upper body. Like, you would break things down, 5 sets of 5. Well, you need to, break that down into a skill, basically. Okay, 5 sets of 5 jumping bar muscle up, and then 5 sets of 5 kip swings. And like, you have to have this structure. Otherwise, if you're just practicing on a whim, you're never going to get it, like, ever. I pretty much guarantee that.
No, yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I like what you said earlier about when it comes down to skills and refining things and breaking things down and figuring out what the person needs to work on individually. And I think that's such an overlooked thing in coaching, is that we're not just here to coach you in movements. We're not just here to coach you in your nutrition. We're just not here to get you fitter, stronger, faster, whatever. At the end of the day, we're also a major filter.
Yeah. We're saving you so much time.
Yeah, we filter out the things that aren't going to work for you specifically, but those are just tools in the toolkit, right? Because there's a lot of tools available out there, even for each specific movement that we're working on. But the problem is they don't work for everybody.
Yes.
So we have to isolate that, look at you and be like, okay, well, this is what Susan needs to do in order to get a strict handstand push-up.
Yep.
Based on, like, regardless of what she sees on Instagram. Sorry, but wall-facing handstand push-ups complex with a wall walk is not what you need to be doing right now.
Yes.
So,
oh my gosh.
Even though we see that,
Yeah.
we could see where you're at specifically, and then reverse engineer it backwards to the point where we know what your specific starting point is to get you the next level, and then help you up the next step of the ladder.
Yeah, I like how you reference Instagram, because that's something I think about a lot, is like, these Instagram people, they'll put a great drill out there, and I can see how it could work maybe for an ex-gymnast, or maybe in a personal training setting. But in a class setting, or if somebody's trying to teach themselves this on their own, I can tell that it's not going to work, because I coach both, right? I coach personal training and I coach group class. There are certain things that will work in certain settings and with certain people. And if you don't know that, because you're not a personal trainer or anything, you're just going to waste your time. And you're just going to keep wasting your time. And I really don't want people to do that in our gym. I want them to get better and get better faster, because we've been there. We've been there wasting our time doing silly drills. And so with all of our experience and knowledge now, we can kind of, like Matt said, filter out the garbage and get you to your goal faster.
Yeah. And it's not that any of these drills are bad. They're all going to work, but in the right context.
Yes.
So let's go and move on to like an example structure of how we would actually, so we talked about filtering of like an A, B, C, D, E, F, like how we design our training programs. So let's go over A, which is just movement prep. B, which is like, let's just use the strict handstand push-up as an example. So like accumulate 45 reps in sets of 5 unbroken. Resting is needed. Now that is more advanced, but I just chose that example because that's something that I had to do in my training. that my coach would always give me. And I thought that was really good because it forced me and taught me not only how to pace, but also to how to read my own muscle endurance.
Yeah.
And then I'd also time my rest breaks.
Yes.
And then I would see what my total rest time was. I'd be like, okay, where can I clean up time? And then like C would be like bar muscle up. So accumulate 5 to 10 reps in 1 to 2 unbroken sets, resting as needed. Okay. Again, these are more extreme examples, but I think it just better illustrates it on what we're trying to get through here.
Yeah. And you said something about prepping for these as well.
So movement prep. So kind of like a better example would be how we actually lay out what a day's worth of training. So A, B, C.
Okay.
So A being our movement prep.
You want me to do an example for a movement?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Like if you were going to take strict handstand push-up, like Matt said, I would have movement prep for like warm-up, just be like handstand holds, some negatives probably, just kind of prepping the body to be inverted at that point. And it also allows people to gain more endurance just upside down, because in order to do more reps, you have to be able to hold yourself upside down for a longer period of time. So that's kind of how I would prep somebody for that. And then like you said, maybe accumulate 45 reps, 5 sets of 5 as fast as possible, rest as needed. And then afterwards, probably add in bodybuilding work, which is going to help them get more muscle endurance and strength to do the movement itself. So, probably doing some seated strict press and some type of variation, bench press, wall walks, all those kind of accessory movements combined to complete like a whole 30-minute skill session training.
Wow, that was very thorough. I have nothing to add. Well done. Okay, so I gave kind of a more advanced example of a movement structure for a strict handstand push-up. Why don't you take beginner and intermediate? So start with beginner.
A beginner person who can't do a handstand push-up at all is going to have like the same exact structure with a prep, doing types of holds. So probably just doing a push-up plank hold or a pike hold off of a bench if they can do that. And then probably working on just accumulating push-ups or pike push-ups if possible. I guess that would be the intermediate version. And then more so for a beginner and an intermediate person, they're going to do a lot more bodybuilding because they just have to get a lot stronger. And then quite honestly, if you're doing a high skill and you're a beginner or an intermediate person, you need to do some sessions one-on-one with a coach to learn how to do the drill. Because I've done this before where I give people the drill, I give them the video, and then they're practicing it and I see them, practicing it and I'm like, well, that's completely wrong. And I know it's wrong because you're just trying to self-teach yourself. So I think it's important to do a session, get some guidance on how to do it, how it should feel, what a successful rep feels like with a coach, and then go back and do the drills on your own for a few weeks and then come back and check in with the coach, do it again. That is the best way to do it because if you're just going to do self-taught method, it's going to take forever.
Excuse me. Yeah, no, it is going to take forever. And I've worked with a lot of people who, one of the first things they tell me afterwards is like, I can't believe I didn't do this sooner. Meaning that like, I can't believe I didn't just start getting some one-on-one guidance on this.
Yeah, just from the get-go, just to get an idea of a reference point of like, where am I at and how realistic is this? What kind of timeline am I looking at? Like a year or more? Because a lot of people, it's going to be a year. I'm very honest, especially if you're only going to work on that skill like once or twice a week. It's going to take probably a year if you're a beginner.
Yeah, and that's another thing we haven't even covered is like not everyone needs to be doing the same intensity, frequency, or volume to get these skills. And that's something where we step in as well. And usually frequency is the first thing we start with.
Yeah. If you already have a good amount of strength coming in, then great. Then you really only need a couple sessions probably with a coach to refine technique and skill work. And then from there, you're probably set to go. And you can probably do it on your own. Now, if you're a beginner, you're going to need a lot more guidance and a lot more frequency at first just to kind of like get a feel of what you're doing and making sure you're doing everything correctly. And then you're probably free to go after a longer period of time.
Yeah, right. Okay, totally. And I definitely want to chat with you something about conditioning with skill exposure. So now this is actually more an advanced thing is like now learning to do these higher skill things with localized muscle fatigue. So a good example of this would be like calorie rowing and toes to bar, or maybe even like ski erg and toes to bar, or like GHD sit up and ring muscle up. because they're all like localized muscle fatigue that use similar muscle groups, and how we would actually train that.
Yeah, at first I would definitely train it with the skill first and then the conditioning kind of second, and the conditioning being like an active rest almost. Like you're not just standing around moving, like we're kind of past that at this point. We've gained the skill, we have some muscle endurance. Okay, now we're going to throw in some higher heart rate stuff, but we're going to just start with it very controlled. And so I would have someone do like 5 sets of, 3 reps of whatever movement. And then in the remaining time, you're just biking, right? And you're just kind of accumulating body movement, and then you have to go right into the skill again. That's kind of how it started. And then as they get better, then you would flip-flop it and have more of like the aerobic piece first to fatigue you, and then you have to do the skill.
Right. So that's Caitlin's style. This is how I like to do it, is I like to design EMOMs specifically with as a couplet. And so like a 20-minute EMOM would be a good example. And this, like a good example would be like minute 1, 15 cal row, minute 2, like 10 toes to bar. So that's that way I can accumulate volume in that, or I can get feedback on how many reps I'm actually getting. If I break down the toes to bar, I'm like, okay, I'm going to lower the reps down to like 7 or 5, or I can lower the cals to where I can do more toes to bar. So it gives me some leeway also to reference on how much volume I can accumulate in a 20-minute time period. So that's one way to do it. And that's also a good way because there's forced rest. So you're able to practice the skill with a moderate heart rate, but it's not like in an actual for time workout where you're going for true speed. And then the other way I like to do it is intervals, but with a drop set in there. What I mean by that is, let's use the rowing toes to bar example again. I use this to bait people back on to the rower or the toes to bar. So I'll have like a 30 cal row, 30 toes to bar, or like let's say 30 cal row, 20 toes to bar, and then like a 20 cal row, and then 10 toes to bar, and then rest 3 to 5 minutes. So there'd be a full recovery. But the second set is specifically designed to be smaller in reps. So that way I'm baited to go back into it a lot faster. So that way I'm not wasting time. Because mentally, if I have to do 20 toes to bar, tired, I'm less likely to get on that bar. I'm more likely to chalk my hands and just stand there and look at it for a little bit. Where it's only 10, it's like, well, I can do 10. More like a rep range based on the individual where they know they could probably go unbroken. And then I have a full recovery of 3 to 5 minutes before repeating that for about 3 sets.
Yeah, I like those styles of workouts.
Thank you. Is that all you had to say?
Yeah, I like those.
Okay. And the reason why this works is because, well, like Caitlin said earlier, is that the skill is trained before the fatigue hits. Reps are open-ended, and so the volume is controlled, but also there's individualized rest, and so the quality stays high. So the key piece here is that rest is going to be king, so you have to rest. I know that we're CrossFitters and we're used to just doing everything for time and fast and furious, but there's a time and a place for that. There's also a time and a place to slow down.
Yep. And that's when practicing a skill.
Yep, 100%. And then conditioning at the end of the movement still reinforces the movement, but it doesn't compromise the learning piece.
Yep.
So, let's move on to how to elevate the skill once you own it. So once it's locked in, we can start adding fatigue to replicate the sport demand. So we kind of talked about training for it. Now let's kind of talk about some examples of how we would actually use this in an actual training setting or in an actual workout, and how to strategize that.
Well, you could just start by doing some for time workouts just to see how fast you can go. We've been talking about doing EMOMs and intervals with accumulated rest. And then so once you have the skill and you're able to do it in a high heart rate setting and with other movements involved, then the next step is to try to do it as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm. I would also add to that, a good way to test this as well and to have it in a workout setting is to do a single modality for time workout for that movement itself.
Yeah.
So like 30 muscle-ups
exactly.
for time, 75 toes to bar for time.
Yeah, high volume, of the skill, and see how fast you can accumulate all those reps.
100%. And what also that allows us to do is see what gives out first in terms of either, is it localized muscle fatigue? Does the technique break down? Does power break down? Does like something specific like the grip start to slip, or is the heart rate too high? Because then that allows us to identify the next problem, articulate it, and then find a way to mitigate it. Because, for example, let's say someone has the strength and the skill and the endurance, localized muscle endurance, I should say specifically, to do 30 ring muscle ups, but let's say their heart rate is super jacked up the entire time, and that's actually the limiter. I've seen so many people do that, and
they should work on conditioning.
Well, they think they need to work on the muscle up still.
No,
which is funny. And then you're just like,
they're aerobic.
I'm like, bro,
You clearly don't do intervals on your bike.
You gotta get on the bike. You gotta start running.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it's not like you're strong enough, and you like I see this all the time. And then let's not get into it because we've talked about this before on another podcast about aerobic base, but let's not even get into that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. There's so many CrossFit workouts though that test this. I mean, not just 30 ring muscle ups for time, but like you said, like there's the snatch, there's Isabel, there's Grace.
JC is a good example of a triplet.
Yeah, of a muscle, and it's handstand push-ups, ring dips, and push-ups. 21:59. That's a great workout. And these are all testing pieces to see what gives out first. And I love doing workouts like that because it's very eye-opening, and then allows you to replan your training and so to get better at that.
Yeah.
And I use that a lot when I'm programming for class and I'm testing people and seeing and I like coaching the classes because I get a lot of feedback to see okay, what gave out on you guys first. And unfortunately, it's always aerobic.
Usually it's aerobic and strength.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean,
it's aerobic first though.
it usually is aerobic first, unfortunately. And yeah, it's really hard convincing people to do the boring interval work. I know, guys, I know this is totally off topic, but please do yourself a favor and do aerobic work and do your intervals. I know they're boring. I know when you guys look at them that they don't look sexy because there's no gymnastics or barbell in it, but
it's easy. It's mentally so easy to do.
And it makes CrossFit so much easier.
Yeah.
Like you guys whine all the time that CrossFit's hard. Well, this makes it a lot easier. When you can breathe during a workout is like the best feeling ever.
Yep.
Especially a hard.
So you're not dying.
Yeah. It's like one less thing. It's like now my muscles just hurt.
Yes, exactly.
So you can either both or one. I'd rather take one.
Anyway.
Sorry, I digress. So the main key takeaway here is that you need to stop doing skill work only when you're exhausted. That's probably the number one thing you need to focus on. And if you need help, talk to us. We're more than happy to help you one-on-one. And then practice when fresh, build strength, and then get reps in a smart structure. The structure has to be individualized.
Yeah, and you have to be practicing scaled movements of the big skill that you're trying to accomplish. If you came to my Ring Muscle Up workshop recently, I gave a lot of demos of different drills, and I told everybody, I usually pick one drill and I do it I pick a drill and I do it, once a week. Maybe I would do 2 drills twice a week, but I accumulate 30 to 50 reps of that drill because I can't always do ring muscle ups every day. I'm going to get, too tired and too sore. So I have to practice in a lower skilled setting in order to accumulate the reps. And I swear this has been something that has really helped me in the last few months, and I only want to keep doing it, and then hopefully in 6 months it'll be even better. Right. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
That's awesome. And I do see you all the time working on and even making up your own drills based on specifically what you need to work on.
Yeah.
So that's really cool to see.
Yeah, I'm always trying to kind of play around with technique and try to see if I can mimic the movement pattern in a bodybuilding setting almost, or a very controlled setting, just so I can get more mind muscle connection so that it's mindless when I'm doing it. It's just natural and fluid.
Right. Can you share an example of something that you're working on right now that would be helpful to people listening on whatever you're working on?
Well, yeah, I mean, specifically right now with ring muscle ups, I've been working on that a lot, and I've been trying to do more strict style because that helps me not only practice the technique, but it also gives me the strength work at the same time. And so I kind of like that combination. And so I do a lot of banded strict ring muscle ups, and it just really helps me dial in the movement pattern of keeping the rings close and tight to the body, while at the same time really taxing my muscles and core stability to stay in that position. So I get a lot of benefit in one drill and one movement. So that's why I do that one a lot. And I play around with different styles of holding the band and all different things.
Yeah. And you notice that even though Caitlin is very fit and technically proficient enough to where she doesn't need to do this, technically speaking, in terms of hierarchy that we're talking about, that she still layers all these small individual things of skill work and movement prep before she adds intensity later.
Yeah. And again, it's because, my joints can't take on that much. I mean, I also get very sore and fatigued. And so I find that this is much more joint friendly and I can add more volume in this way without killing myself.
Yeah, 100%. And what I challenge all of you to do this week, whenever you listen to this podcast, is to pick just one skill that you need to work on and just work on it 2 to 3 days a week, but have someone actually watch you to give you feedback. Because a lot of times we think you're moving well and you're may not moving well bad enough to where you get hurt, but you're definitely moving bad enough to where you're reinforcing poor habits. And the last thing you want to do is use your precious time
Yes.
to reinforce something that's not going to benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you do, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
No, I think we covered it all.
Okay, fantastic. So if you need help figuring out what strength you're missing or how we can structure it for you, feel free to book a one-on-one meeting with us. We'd be more than happy to chat with you on how we can get you to the next level. Thank you so much for listening. If this was helpful, please leave us an honest review so that way we know to make more content just like this. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Red Wolf CrossFit and DM your content suggestions there. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, good luck. Have fun.
Nailed it.